The silver-haired woman behind the immense desk was perfectly groomed, and her face was the product of the sort of biosculpt available only to people for whom money was truly no object. Unlike the nondescript, somehow subliminally seedy man in the uniform of a Sternwolt Lines purser, she was perfectly suited to the elegant office, yet there was a coldness in her eyes, and her smile held a honed dura-alloy edge that beaded the purser's forehead with sweat. "I'm sorry, Madame Ostwell, but they won't sell." The woman said nothing, only gazed at him, and he swallowed. "I upped the offer to the maximum authorized amount, but only 3 or 4 of them were even interested. You assured us that your local knowledge of this sector suited you for the job, that we could rely upon your good offices to attain success." "I was certain they'd sell, ma'am. We were offering them 10 years of income for a successful melon grower." "An attractive offer, yet you say they refused it. Why?" I'm not certain, ma'am. They must have given some indication. Near as I could figure out, they simply didn't want the money, ma'am. I talked to old Esteban, the yokel who runs the field. He said that his wife, his father, his grandfather were all buried in the plot behind his house. That was fairly typical of what all of them said, ma'am. Parochialism, regretfully typical of these untutored frontier people. I suppose I ought to have expected it, and you should have anticipated as well, Mr. Bergen. I fear you've served us less than satisfactorily in this matter." "I did my best, Madame Ostwelt." "I'm sure you did. That's the problem. We'll be in touch, Mr. Bergen." The purser withdrew with obvious relief, and the woman pressed a stud on her desk panel. A discreetly hidden door slid open within 20 seconds, and an athletic young man walked in. "Yes, mother?" "You were right about Mr. Bergen, Gerald. The man's an utter incompetent." "Is he now?" "Utterly. How fortunate that no one knows he was acting for us. In fact, I think it would be a very good idea to take steps to ensure that no one ever does know that he was representing our interests." "I'll see to it. A good son is a mother's greatest treasure." "Still, as incompetent as he may be, he has put a finger on the nub of the problem. Dear, farmers can be the most stubborn people in the galaxy, and frontier people cherish such boringly predictable attachments to their land. I'm afraid that if they refused the price that we authorized him to offer, it's unlikely they would sell to anyone at all." "We've had that problem before, mother." "I realize we have had, dear, but alternative methods can be so messy. Do you know, the most provoking thing of all is, they don't even know why we want that little dirtball." "No one does yet, mother. That's the whole point, isn't it?" "Perhaps, but I really think it might not mind as much if I were up against an opposition that understood the rules of the game. The stakes, of course." "Mother, their system is the only logical place to become the primary transfer node for the jump point serving 3 entire sectors. You know it, I know it, and whenever the survey gets around to releasing its new astrograph report, every major shipping line will know it too. Does it really matter whether they know it or not?" "Don't forget who taught you everything you know, dear. It really is unbecoming for a son to lecture his mother." "Was I lecturing? I didn't mean to. Why don't we think of it as a case of demonstrating I've done my homework?" "You got that from my genes, not your father's." "Still, you're quite right. All that matters is making certain that Galcorp owns the only habitable real estate in the system when the time comes. All of it. And, well, if we have to be messy, I suppose there's a way to say about it. Who do you think we should put in charge of this?" "Why not me?" "Well, you've never done any field work, dear." "Which doesn't mean I can't handle it. Besides, we ought to keep command loop on this as secure as possible, and every young man should start at the bottom. It helps him appreciate the big picture when he finally winds up at the top. Not that I have a desire to wind up at the top for many more years, mother." "Wisdom beyond your years. Very well. It is your project. Before you take any steps, be sure you research the situation thoroughly. This is the sort of thing that's seldom as simple as it looks at first glance, and I don't want my only son to suffer any unpleasant surprises." "Of course not, mother. I'll just pop out to Ursula and spend a few weeks nosing around Sector Central. I'm sure I can find some generous soul with the access to provide the information we need. Who knows? I may even find the ideal people for the messy little job we discussed." 1 week after his arrival on Santa Cruz, Paul Merritt sat back on the comfortable crash couch and rubbed his chin with something very like awe. The screen before him glowed with a complicated schematic any Bolo tech would have given 10 years of his life to study, and its design was over 50 years old. 50 years! Incredible! Working all by herself with only the resources of a single automated maintenance depot. Admittedly a superbly equipped one, but still only a single depot. Marina Stavrakis developed Nike's Brain Box, designed into one that made the newest Mark 25s look clumsy and slow. He tilted the couch back and crossed his legs. More screens and displays glowed around him, filling Nike's fighting compartment with a dim, shifting luminescence. There were more of them here than there would have been in a more modern, recent Bolo. Nike was a modified Mark 23 after all. Humans needed broader band data interfaces than any Bolo did, and Nike's basic technology was 80 years old, without more recent updates in human-machine information management systems. But for all that, the compartment was surprisingly spacious. Not only had Nike been the first fully autonomous Bolo, whether anyone knew it or not, but she'd also been the first to incorporate Molly Cirque psychotronics. It was very early generation stuff, considerably bulkier than its more modern equivalent, but Stavrakis had used it in some amazingly innovative ways. What she might have accomplished with current technologies scarcely bore thinking on. He turned his couch and keyed another screen to life. A 49-year-old time and date display glowed in one corner, and the white-haired woman who appeared in it sat on the same crash couch Merritt now occupied. She was far frailer and older than the single poor quality flat pick of Major Stavrakis he'd found in Central surviving records, but her olive dark eyes were still sharp and alert. He'd already played the recording 3 times, yet he felt a sense of fresh respect coupled with the regret he'd never get to know her as she began to speak.
Since you're doing this, whoever you are, someone must have finally remembered where they parked Nike and me. I suppose I should be a bit put out with their brigade in the Navy, but from the little Jeremiah picked up over the all units channels, we assume the Quern got through to Central. I assume the rest of the discard team has been lost at the same time since they all knew where I was. Jeremiah has offered to use the commercial bands to request a relief ship with a proper medical officer, but I've turned him down. However, he may grump and grouse. Santa Cruz is his home now. I know he really loves it here, and so do I suppose. Besides, from the bits and pieces we can pick up, the Quern are still operating in some force in the sector. Given their native habitat, I doubt they'd care much for Santa Cruz's climate, and I suppose that's the main reason they've never paid us a visit. On the other hand, they might just change their mind if they started intercepting transmissions from us. Nike's good, but I'd soon just as not match her up against a Quern planetary assault force. Even if she won, there wouldn't be very many surviving Santa Cruzans to cheer for her when it was over. Actually, it hasn't been a bad life. A little lonely sometimes. Thanks to all the discard security, most of the locals never knew Nike and I were here, and those who did know seemed to have forgotten. I had dear Jeremiah. He and I accepted long ago that we'd become permanent residents of Santa Cruz. In addition to him, I had Nike, my work, plenty of time to spend with all 3 of them, and of course, no brass to give me a hard time. Talk about research freedom. Unfortunately, it would appear I'm finally running out of time. My family's always been prone to heart trouble, and I've had my warning. I've discussed it with Nike. She tends to worry. I've made it a habit to be honest with her, and she understands the depot doesn't stock the sort of spares I need. I've also made arrangements to put her on autonomous standby when the time comes. I'm certain someone somewhere else has picked up where discard is left off. By now, there's probably a whole new generation of autonomous Bolos out there. But now that you've come to relieve me, I think you'll find that Nike still has a few surprises of her own. Take care of her, whoever you are. She's quite a girl. I'm sure my tinkering's going to raise a few eyebrows. Lord knows the desk jockeys would tear their hair at the mere thought of someone with the capabilities I've given her. But I've never regretted a single facet of her design. She's unique, and she's been more than just my friend. When 40 winters shall besiege thy brow, and dig deep trenches in thy beauty's field, thy youth's proud livery, so gazed on now, will be a tattered weed of small worth held. Then being asked where all thy beauty lies, where all the treasure of thy lusty days, to say with thine deep sunken eyes, were an ill-fitting shame and a thriftless praise. How much more praise deserve thy beauty's use, if thou could answer, thou fair child of mine, Shall some count and make mine own excuse, proving her beauty by succession thine? This were to be made new when thou art old, and see thy warm blood when thou wast feel cold. A tiny misquote, perhaps, but I think Shakespeare would forgive me. Take good care of my child, whoever you are.
The screen blanked and Merritt shook his head. You must have been quite a girl yourself, Major. She was, the Bolo said softly. He looked up at the small green light glowing below the speaker from which it came. Now that he had seen Stravakis' last log entry, it no longer seemed strange to hear Nike speak without prompting. There was a moment of silence, and the Bolo continued in that same soft voice. I never realized I had that message in my memory, Commander. She must have recorded it during one of my down periods. She didn't want you to worry about her. Merritt didn't even want to think about how the psych types would react to this entire conversation. Every field officer of the Dinochrome Brigade could quote chapter and verse about the manual's warnings against over-identification with Bolos. They were war machines, the manual said. Self-aware and with personalities, yes, but machines built to fight and die against humanity's enemies, which must, in the final analysis, be regarded as expendable. The Bolos themselves knew that. It was only their human commanders and partners who tended to forget, as Merritt had forgotten on Sandlot. No, I compute that she would not have wanted that. Of course she wouldn't have, but she was proud of you, Nike. Even from the little I've seen so far, she had reason to be. Indeed. I compute that 79 plus years have passed since I was last deployed, Commander. Surely newer and more modern Bolos surpass my capabilities. Fishing for compliments there, Nike? Major Stavakis was right. The desk jockeys would tear their hair out if they could hear you now. Why? Because they worry about Bolos that get too human. Because they fear what such a Bolo might do, or because they fear of what it might refuse to do. I think it's because they're afraid it might start asking questions just like those, Merritt said. You're a very powerful fighting machine, Nike. There's never ever been an instance of an undamaged Bolo in proper repair violating orders, but we've had the occasional accident where a unit that suffered damage or lack of maintenance. That's why the brigade still worries about its ability to retain control over the newer, more autonomous units. They've cut back on the inhibitory software of the Mark 25s, but the core package is still in there. A wise precaution. An irrational machine with the combat power I possess would be far too dangerous to its friends. Well, I'm afraid I have to agree. But that's what would upset the desk jockeys about you. You don't have anywhere near the system's redundancy that the Mark 24s and 25s have. Technically, that makes you more vulnerable to failure from battle damage and probably worse from HQ's perspective. From what I've seen so far suggests that Major Stavakis' modifications to your personality and command centers are way outside the current parameters as well. Just for starters, your inhibitory package is a lot less restrictive. No modern Bolo should be as awake as you are, outside battle mode either, and it looks like your personality integration is at least a full magnitude more developed than a Mark 25's. I'm not certain yet, but coupled with the modifications to your secondary command cortex, I suspect you might even be able to hold off the Omega Worm for a while. Omega Worm? Sorry, that's the current slang for the Total Systems Override program. There was a moment of silence, a very human moment, which Merritt understood perfectly. The TSORP was the ultimate defense against a rogue Bolo, a suicide file designed to crash every execution file in the memory of any Bolo which disobeyed the direct orders of its properly identified commander. Many brigade personnel, like Merritt himself, questioned the TSORP's necessity. Since the Brainbox technology had come in, so many redundant standalone backup systems had been added to the Bolo's brains that the possibility of irrational behavior virtually no longer existed. And just as he had told Nike, no Bolo ever disobeyed a legal order, but the TSORP had been incorporated into the very first self-aware Bolos and every Bolo since. And because it could not be a pleasant thing to know that an involuntary suicide override controlled by others was part of your basic command matrix either. I believe you are correct, Commander. I could not resist it indefinitely, of course. Yet I compute that with the additional processing capability Major Stavakis has installed within my psychotronics, it would allow me to delay file execution for no less than 40 minutes and possibly as much as an hour. Does this constitute an unwarrantable risk factor in my design? Well, I don't think so. Of course, given my own record, I may not be the most impartial judge. I guess the risk factor depends on how likely you are to disobey your commander's orders. I am a unit of the Dinochrome Brigade. I could never act against the honor of my brigade commander. I know, Nike, I know. I told you I wasn't worried. Merritt gave the couch arm one more pat, then rose and yawned hugely. Sorry, Nike. Unlike you, I don't have a fusion plant, and it's been a very long day for me. I need some shut-eye. Of course, Commander. Wake me at 0600, would you? Certainly. Thank you. He smiled and waved to the visual pickup from the main fire control screens. It was a common gesture of courtesy among the men and women who commanded the self-aware war machines of the Dinochrome Brigade, yet it had more meaning than just usual for him tonight. The green system's active light under the speaker flashed in an unmistakable response. He chuckled wearily and climbed out the hatch.
I watch the depot's interior optics as my new commander makes his way down the corridor to the personnel section. He is only my second commander. I am aware that my experimental data is thus insufficient to permit a realistic evaluation of his suitability as Major Stavaka's replacement, and he is quite different from my previous commander. But I feel content. It is good to have a commander once more. Yet this is more than the relief a unit of the line should feel at receiving a new commander. There is something about him which I cannot adequately define. I devoted 20.0571 seconds in an attempt to do so, but without success. Perhaps further acquaintance with him provide the critical data my analysis presently lacks. I consider what he has said as I watch him prepare for bed. He is correct about the danger of an uncontrollable unit of the line would pose to all about it. My function is to protect and defend humanity, not to threaten my creators, and I feel an odd disquiet at the thought that I am well less protected against that possibility than more modern Bolos. Yet my commander is also correct in recognizing the remote possibility of such a situation. TSORP becomes the operational only in the unit that rejects direct orders, and I cannot conceive of a unit of the line in proper repair that would commit such an act. My commander extinguishes the lights in his new quarters, and I leave the audio system online. Should he wake and desire to communicate with me, I will be ready. He has not instructed me to return to standby to conserve power. In that much, at least, he is like Major Stavaka's. My main memory contains much background information and data on standard operating procedure. I realize how rare this is, and I am grateful for it. The depot power systems are fully charged, and I do not even require internal power to maintain full alert status, and I return to my library files with pleasure.